Hi, good evening, and salam sejahtera to everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar, where today we will be speaking about the Seed Treaty, and we will be discussing about the proposals to enhance the multilateral system of access and benefit sharing. It's right there on your screen right now. And together with us, there will be three main speakers, two from Third World Network and a speaker from India. So what we will be learning today is that we would be learning what the developed country governments and their corporations are up to in relation to this treaty, and what would happen if we gave them full control of our seeds and genetic data to their gene banks and to their industries. In fact, we might be signing away the control of our plants. So thank you so much for joining us today for at least for the Asia Pacific. For those of us from the Asia Pacific region, it's also very late or getting late. So thank you very much for joining this very important webinar. So we have three speakers today with us. We have Karina Yong from the Third World Network. I will just give a quick introduction to the speakers today, and then I will hand it over to them to start with the presentations. So very quickly, Karina is a senior researcher with the Third World Network, and she focuses on the impact of investment and trade agreements, and as well as on trade agreements which are on human rights, such as the right to health, the right to food, indigenous rights, and responsible business conduct, as well as on environmental and other laws and policy in developing and least developed countries. With Karina, we also have Saumik Banerjee from the Bharat Beach Swaraj Manch. And Saumik is a researcher and practitioner of agroecology and heirloom seed conservation. He is currently engaged in conservation research of indigenous varieties and land races of field crops through field conservation with farmer groups in the East and Central India. And he works very closely with Adivasi communities, practicing shifting cultivation in the East and Central India towards guided fallow and forest gardens. And last but not least, we have with us Nitin Ramakrishnan with Third World Network, and he's a senior researcher, and he follows the negotiations at the WHO, CBD, and FAO very, very closely, and in particular to access and benefit sharing, which is what we will be discussing today. So I'm going to quickly give you a run through of the agenda for today. Nitin, can you move on to the next, not this, but to the next one? So the agenda today is divided into four parts. So the first part, we will have Karina Yong speaking on fundamental rights, what is access and benefit sharing, what is the CBD versus the ITP GRFA. I'm not going to go into what these acronyms are because the speakers themselves will be explaining what this is. And then we will look into the current functioning of the multilateral system. And in part two, we will listen from Saumik, a case study or examples from India. And in part three, Nitin will come in to discuss a little bit more on the proposals to enhance the functioning of MLS and the proposal to expand Annex 1 and the work group process. And finally, under part four, we will be having more discussion. It will be an open discussion, and we will be looking at the demands from each of our countries or what we can do at the national level to stop the proposals from going through. I am going to explain how this is going to be done. So the speakers will be speaking, will be sharing their presentations. If you have if you need any clarification on what they have presented, please write it on the chat, and I will call them out to answer some of these clarification questions. Otherwise, your main questions, we can keep it to discussion at the end. So we're going to try and keep this discussion for 1.5 hours, and the speakers would speak for about 50 minutes. and then we will take on the discussion at the end. I hope this is okay. And just quickly before we move on to the next session itself, perhaps if you want to use the react button, just to see how many of you have actually heard of the seed treaty, or know, or have some good knowledge about it. I just want to see the level of knowledge with the participants in the webinar today. You can use maybe any one of the react buttons, like a heart shape or thumbs up, so we quickly see. Okay, so there are a few of you who already have some knowledge on this. Okay, thank you so much for participating in that. So we're going to go into the introduction of this, and I am going to pass this over to the first speaker. If it's okay, to Karina, would you like to?
Yes, thanks, Diva. Hi,
Okay.
everyone. Thank you for coming. Just to remind everybody, we have this in translation into English and Bahasa Indonesia. Instructions are in the chat. So before we do a deep dive, can I have the next slide, please? Meeting. Before we do a deep dive into today's discussion, the next one as well. Just go straight to back to basics. Yeah, that's the one. So before we go straight, I'll go into the discussion for today, right? Which is the access and benefit sharing provisions under the ITPGRFA, or the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture. We also know it as the Seed Treaty. Sometimes people call it the Plant Treaty. Sometimes people call it the Food Treaty, because it's the treaty that actually relates to farmers' rights and food security. So what I wanted us to remember is that we have rights, whether as farmers, as indigenous communities, or even as citizens and consumers. We have rights, and these rights are fundamental. They have been recognized in various UN instruments. So the ones that I want to touch upon in relation to farmers, this one is actually in Article 9 of I'll call it the Seed Treaty, the ITPGRFA. I'll use the Seed Treaty for today. And not only has it been recognized in Article 9 of the Seed Treaty, but it has been confirmed in all the other instruments that you see there: the Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights Convention, the United Nations Declaration on the Right of Peasants and People Working in the Rural Areas, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and the UN Special Rapporteur as well to the right to food, Michael Fakhri, has recently issued two very strong statements on the right to food, the rights of farmers, and on seeds. So in relation to farmers, it's important to remember that there are four specific rights that are always mentioned. The rights which relate to the protection of traditional knowledge, relating to the plant genetic resources developed by farmers, which must be safeguarded. And then there's the right of farmers to equitable benefit sharing from the utilization of plant genetic resources, their plants, their seeds that they have conserved or developed. And farmers are entitled to participate. They must be allowed to participate in decisions related to plant genetic resources. And most importantly, this is the cornerstone of farmer seed systems, the right of farmers to save, use, exchange, and sell farm-safe seeds. Agency, control, and power over their seeds. So now that we move on to the next slide, in relation to indigenous peoples, the rights are stated as rights in relation to their land, territories, and resources that they have traditionally owned, occupied, or used. States must legally recognize and protect these rights, respecting indigenous customs and land tenure systems. Rights to redress and compensation if their lands are taken without free, prior, and informed consent. So again, here, states have the duty to engage indigenous communities in good faith consultations, and they must secure free, prior, and informed consent through the representative institutions of indigenous peoples before enacting policies that affect them. And one last one, but not the least, our rights, next slide, as consumers and as citizens. Food sovereignty guarantees the right for us to choose foods that are in line with cultural, religious, and individual needs, supported by transparent and accessible information on nutritional and health impacts, especially concerning processed foods. So what does all these mean? All these rights, what does it mean? What was our governments do? Okay, next slide, please. It means that our governments must take appropriate measures to support farmer seed systems and promote the use of farmer seeds and ensure and grow biodiversity. And in relation to that, the state shall ensure that any seed policy, any plant variety protection, or other intellectual property laws, for example, patents on seeds, any sort of seed certification scheme, seed quality scheme, or seed marketing law must respect and take into account the rights, needs, and realities of farmers and other people working in rural areas. And the state has a responsibility to ensure not just that we get food, not just that we have full tummies, but this food must be nutritious, it must be affordable with respect and fairness, both now and in the future. It must be sustainable. So in short, next please, Nitin. States must respect, protect, and fulfill those rights, not just at home, not just in relation to its own citizens, but the principle of extraterritoriality under international law means that states must also fulfill, respect, and protect these rights of citizens abroad when they trade with other countries, when they have international relations with other countries. For example, from the north to the south, the countries of the north must protect the rights of the citizens, must assist in protecting and respecting the rights of the citizens of the south. And also for corporations and businesses that the states have control over, they have to ensure that there's a legal framework, policies that ensure that these corporations abide by these human rights, which I've just stated. And all this has to go alongside accountability, transparency, and proper consultation. Right? So let's go to where we are today. So today, why is it that despite the fact that we have all these rights, however, today we are struggling? More and more, we are losing control over our resources, our seeds, which are becoming more concentrated in the hands of corporations. I'm sure many of you have heard these statistics already. Like 4 of the largest seed companies, we all know them, it's BASF, Bayer, the Syngenta Group, or Corteva AgriScience, are owning something like 60% of the seed market. And these 4 are also the largest pesticide companies globally. And that really is cause for concern, because then the question is, what is the quality and the nutritional value of the food that we are eating, right? So how is it that these companies have become so powerful? What are the issues here? Access, that they have gotten access to resources, and the monopoly that goes with this access. And that's why I wanted to talk just an overview of the issues within what we're facing today, by what farmers are facing today under food security, food sovereignty. I just want to give this broad overview over the issues of access and monopoly. Okay, let's go to access first. The access and benefit sharing, the slide that you see here. So in relation to access, we are looking at 2 international agreements, right? The Convention on Biological Diversity. This is elaborated further in Nagoya Protocol. They go together, okay? And the other one is our seed treaty. Let me go through the Convention on Biological Diversity first. I'll call it CBD for short, okay? Stay here, Nitin, for the slide, okay? So stay here, previous one, okay? So just stay here first. Yeah, so the CBD, prior to the CBD, seeds or natural resources were seen as the common heritage of humankind, right? But what was special about the CBD was that the CBD made it gave national ownership over natural resources. So now under the CBD, we have national sovereignty on control over biological resources. And it was a framework that provided for conservation, sustainable utilization, and access and benefit sharing. All right, and the details of how this should work out is in the Nagoya Protocol. Now, when we talk about access, it's access to genetic resources, biological resources capable of producing certain traits and characteristics for research and development. At the same time, the access is granted to these natural resources of a country or a community. At the same time, there must be a sharing of outcomes of research and development by the user, the user meaning the company or another country that takes those resources, and it must be shared fairly and equitably. So access and benefit sharing, that's why ABS. Now it's very, very critical to note, stay here, Nikki, it's very critical to note that this is a bilateral system. So under the CBD, resources belong to a country and its communities. So because of that, if I wanted to use those resources, I would have to go to the countries and the communities and ask for permission. And there must be prior informed consent and proper consultations, all right? And the countries and the indigenous peoples communities or local communities will determine conditions of access for environmentally sound purposes. And the benefits arising from the use of these genetic resources must be shared fairly and equitably back with the providers, right? And benefits here is very wide. Now, this is important to note. The benefit could be knowledge, could be technology, products, services, share of revenue, etc. So not just monetary, and intellectual property rights are not encouraged, okay? So in contrast, now we go to the next slide, Nikki. So I was talking about ITP-GRFA, not that one, the one before. Just stay there, it's okay. Yes, so now we have, if you look at the third row, the ITP-GRFA, that's the seed treaty. Now we have a different system under the seed treaty. It's almost like an exception to the system under the CBD in relation to plant genetic resources for food and agriculture. Okay, not all natural resources, but those relating to food and agriculture. The seed treaty provides a different system. It's a multilateral system. What this means is that it's more of a global system of access, right? For 64 listed major food crops in Annex 1. Now, this Annex 1 is the controversial annex that Nitin will be discussing that they are going to expand, okay? For 64 listed major food crops in Annex 1, instead of a user or a company negotiating with a country for permission to use the crops, for materials listed in Annex 1, those under the management and control of countries, and also those held ex situ, meaning those held in collections internationally, because we have international research institutions, right? They have seed collections as well. Now, this is made available for research, breeding, and training for food and agriculture. On what terms? On a standard agreement, which is called the Standard Material Transfer Agreement, right? So instead of negotiating with the communities and the nations, this is something that is standardized and it's provided for. And the monetary benefits from commercialization. So benefits for commercialization here would be only benefits from seed sales, as opposed to under CBD, it was much wider, right? Under CBD, it was knowledge, technology, product, services, share revenue. But under ITP-GRFA or the seed treaty, it's only in relation to seed sales. It will be contributed to a common fund, which countries will then have to fight over. All right. So does this system work? The figures show that it doesn't. Basically, what the figures show is that 7 million seed accessions have been shared to almost 28,000 users. 7 million seeds, 28,000 users. How many have shared benefits? 6. Very shocking. So why does this happen? Because users or breeders or seed breeders can access the seeds not just from national collections, like I said, but also at the international level. And usually they will go to the international gene banks. And when they go to the international gene banks, who get these resources for countries, right? Those seeds that are released by the international gene banks do not have a tracking system. So there's no tracking to see where those seeds go to. And although these providers periodically share information with the Seed Treaty Secretariat, but the information does not contain details, it's aggregate information, okay? And they do not share information with national authorities or farmers about who has accessed these seeds and for what purposes. And most importantly, nothing is said about digital sequence information from seeds. So recipients share them anonymously through open access databases, all right? So now, that was in relation to access, CBD and the seed treaty. Now, once they get access, what happens? So now we know that there's so much natural resources that's out there somewhere, and it has not been accounted for. We have not seen the benefits, having shared access to them. What happens then? Can companies then monopolize these seats, right? And so now we are looking at the other three sections. We've got TRIPS, UPOF 1991, which are both intellectual property laws, and then we have seat certification laws. Now I'm raising this, there's no time to go into detail in this, but I just wanted to flag it because this is something all our countries, especially Southeast Asian countries and India Asian countries, are fighting tooth and nail today. Because not only are your resources being taken out of your country without your knowledge or without accountability, they are then monopolized depending on the sort of intellectual property law which you have in your country. Now, just to flag it quickly, under TRIPS, TRIPS is the Trade-Related Intellectual Property Aspects Agreement that is under WTO. Under this agreement, this was the agreement that said all member states of the WTO must give patent rights or protection over new plant varieties, a sui generis system. So in Southeast Asia, most of us do not have patent systems over plants. What we do have is a protection of new plant variety system, all right? And sui generis means that under TRIPS, although TRIPS said, okay, you must have some form of protection for new plant varieties, it's up to you how you want to draft it according to your national requirements, according to your communities, according to the seed system, the farming system, the food system that you have in your country. So like, for example, in Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, and India, we all have our own systems. So like, for example, the Malaysian system, right? We call it the Protection of New Plant Varieties Act 2004. We actually have provisions within that system that say you cannot, your application for intellectual property protection must contain information of where you got your resources from, must contain clauses that you have already obtained the prior informed consent. So that protects, the taking of natural resources without consent of the community, or that prevents biopiracy. But today, many countries of the North, when they enter into trade agreements with us, they ask us to join this other plant variety protection system called UPOF 1991. Now, UPOF 1991 is very draconian in the sense that it cancels or it severely limits farmers' rights to save and reuse their seeds, and they cannot exchange and sell farm-safe seeds. On top of that, any other provision that is a condition on whether intellectual property rights can be granted, for example, like the one I mentioned under the Malaysian law, you cannot allow for that condition as a condition to grant plant breeders' rights. That means under UPOF, any requirement of accountability is removed. Any requirement not to grant intellectual property for public morality or public interest purposes is removed. So now where are we today? We have a system of access which is not working, which has severe leakages, whereby there's no tracking, there's no transparency, there's no accountability, and we know that our resources are being accessed without the correct manner. And on top of that, if we have a regressive intellectual property system within our country, those seeds can be monopolized. What happens when it's monopolized? It means the corporations have a right of ownership over those seeds. Other people cannot use it unless they get permission from the corporation and through payment of a sum called royalties. So that's where we find ourselves today. All right. So Nitin has got a diagram that very succinctly, Nitin, if you look at the diagram, that very succinctly sums up the situation that we have today. I'll call Nitin to explain it.
Thank you, Karina, for that very elaborate discussion. I will not go detail because it's mostly Karina has explained, but I will just show, and then immediately after this slide, Saumik would intervene and explain certain cases which is on these issues. So it will be, I believe, communicated properly. So it's a very short summary understanding of how the seed moves. As you all know, we have farmers, traditional seed systems and fields. in India, Seed Sovereignty Alliance considers it as a biocultural heritage. So we believe traditional seed systems and seeds as they're available out there. And you all know that previously during colonial times, there were colonial collections which was developed, taking seeds from farmers' fields, right? So these two collections were, I mean, now I would say first one is colonial collection and the other one is basically our traditional heritage. Both these sources exist to share seeds. And what has happened over a period of time, especially after the treaty, through treaty, what is happening is like this. Basically, when your seeds go to agricultural universities or breeders farm, national breeders farms or government breeders farms or gene banks, these are national agencies. And these agencies under the seed treaty, are required to notify the seeds available for them if that belongs to under the 64 crops. So once it notifies, what happens is basically anybody who wants access to these seeds can actually ask our national agencies to share with them. And they share these seeds to all the people who ask under a standard material transfer agreement, which Karina was telling, developed at the FAO level, all the countries coming together and discussing it. And I mean, essentially, I think, as far as I understand, a legal team prepared it and then they just deliberated, adopted it. So this standard material transfer agreement is used to share. And inside this agreement, it is told that, there shouldn't be tracking at the accession level. So if I'm giving, for example, to Karina, let's say packets of rice seeds, five varieties of rice seeds, and then I give another packet of five varieties of wheat. The argument, I mean, the proposal is that do not insist to track each packet, because it could become difficult and burdensome for Karina. So please don't do this. So that's a kind of an understanding which we have taken. But instead, instead of tracking these things, the gene banks and these authorities have also agreed that they will give the standard material transfer agreement to the governing body. They will report about the standard material transfer agreement and the recipients of the seeds to the governing body in periodically, right? This is out there. Let's see what has happening. But so this is how SMTA is working. And using this SMTAs, generally international gene banks like the CGIR centers, Consultative Group of International Agriculture Research, their gene banks collected. There are other international gene banks. And then there are, of course, gene banks in other countries, in developed countries, they also collect. Actually, the question is, from where does the breeders, researchers take seeds, right? Because that shows who is actually dealing with these seeds, who is actually transacting with these seeds. Now, I would argue, given the numbers, which Soumi could show you, that most of these people go to international gene banks, or some of them also go to developed country gene banks, and very limited people come to national agencies. So our countries share it with the gene banks, and then the international gene banks keep sharing it with breeders, researchers, etc. So we really have very limited information. Who are these people taking seeds from international gene banks? This is a critical problem. Now, what are their obligations? They have actually two obligations. One is to inform or deposit their information coming out of their research into a global information system. Interestingly, here also they have given an exemption called as confidential information. So if a researcher understands 5 things about the seed, and the researcher feels one of them can be commercially utilized by him, keeping it confidential, he would just keep it confidential. So he is allowed to do that. So all the information from the research is not actually placed in global information system. It's also very difficult to understand these research outcomes, who has shared the seeds, etc. So there are some problems with the systems working as well. Then we see the second option, which is like when they make a proprietary seed, like for example, they developed a variety on these natural seeds which they got, and doing some research, whatever research you want, sometimes genetically modified, sometimes gene edited, sometimes hybrids, etc., etc. They register it in their names, make it proprietary, and then they commercialize it. So this is the second thing which they do. And what is happening here is most of these modern varieties reach back our fields, right? Hybrids, GMOs, gene edited version. And we understand this is causing an erosion of our biocultural heritage, compromising food security and sovereignty. Saumik would show you what is happening in this time. I'm not going deep into it. I also don't have enough knowledge to talk about these aspects. But now let's see what happens. Other thing, benefit sharing, right? The benefit sharing obligation from the researchers is that when you commercialize proprietary seeds, if you do not allow further research on your proprietary seeds, then from the commercialized variety, from the profit, you make a share of that money which you get as profits to an FIO benefit sharing fund. Okay, and that from that fund, basically what is happening is that generally organizations like civil societies or international organizations who implement projects, they apply for project funding and compete with each other and get funds according to if their proposals got accepted, right? It's not an entitlement under the CBD system, under the Nagoya Protocol system. When your country shares the seeds or genetic resources, it directly comes back to you. It's an entitlement, and you decided how to use it. You decided how to spend it, right? There is no restriction on the benefits which you get it. But here, what is happening is basically a fund, and this fund has to go according to a funding arrangement which the treaty is making, and certain project implementing organizations basically get these funds. It has to be actually coming back to the farmers. Even that, I would argue, is very, very limited of how much money is coming back to farmers' fields. Even the benefit sharing fund is itself getting very limited income. As I said, I mean, as Karina said, it's only 6 users who have paid so far, and that's around like 2% of the entire fund of the treaty funding is around. Now comes the problem of accountability and transparency, right? Basically, I said the agreement, instead of tracking, was to report SMTA to the governing body, and the researchers, breeders also who is commercializing also do financial reporting to the governing body through treaty secretariat. These reports come to the treaty secretariat, and treaty secretariat is supposed to actually report it to the governing body. But what is happening currently is, instead of giving the information to the governing body, it's actually creating an aggregate report, which means basic statistics. How many SMTAs, how many seeds, how many users. It never gives an information which user got what seeds, right? There is no information on that. Similarly, regarding to the funding, what you call as benefit sharing, you would see like certain project implementation narratives and the basic numbers out there. It still does not give you how the benefit sharing fund went into, which kind of projects, and the detailed interpretation is not available. So this is where we ask this question: where is accountability, where is transparency, where is public scrutiny, right? So this is completely missing. How do we know who are using our seeds and for what purposes? And the CBD, this research and development, has to be for environmentally sound purposes. Now, how do we do that? We don't know, right? And how do we know whether the benefits are properly shared by users or not? We still cannot hold anybody accountable on this. How do we be well informed ahead of time about patenting, about plant variety protections, about gene editing or gene modification of our seeds, the seeds which we shared with our agencies, our countries, right? So neither national authorities nor farmers are able to have this information. This is completely missing. So this is the way currently it is functioning. I stop here and I invite Saumik to take on to further presentation.
Thank you, Nitin.
Saumik, you may unmute yourself.
Thank you, Nitin and Karina. So, as we have already discussed the situation about the seed sharing and how the traditional varieties are getting lost. So, next slide. So we have the farmers have developed the seeds. Basically, agriculture is about 10,000 years old, and the farmers have been domesticating thousands of varieties of plants, and they developed millions of varieties of seeds. And that is the foundation of all the companies and other institutions, whatever they are doing. The foundation are these seeds, and they have been developed across the world. There had been some very specific areas where a lot of seeds have been developed. Several of them are in Asia. Next slide. So there are very unique varieties. So in if we look at India, there are varieties of rice like you see on the top right. that even after lot of water, the rice does not drown, it remains above the water. The water level rises and the rice also keeps on growing, like competing with water. Then in the lower right, this mustard variety, it does not need any water. Without any irrigation, it is being grown. We know this cotton crop is a very, it grows in dry type of areas, but this cotton variety growing in northeastern India, where one of the world's highest rainfall is recorded. Then there are these huge brinjals, which are eggplants like 1 kg, 1.5 kg weight. One fruit weighs that much. Then we know about the pulses, legumes, which generally can't stand water. Now, this legume in the top left, it can grow in, in water conditions also. Even if there is some stagnation, it can grow. So these types of unique varieties we have, and these researchers are looking for these varieties. They want to get these specific traits for developing new breeds. Now these varieties are already there, but we want to neglect them. We want to extinguish them and bring in new varieties and saying that we have generated it, but that's not the case. They've all been brought from those old varieties, and many of those old varieties are still there and they are doing fine, but we don't want to bring them in the forefront. This is what is going on. Like there are several saline tolerant rices. So in the coastal areas where the sea water is getting inside the land, and especially during these cyclones or because of climate change, now these are the varieties which can survive saline water. Generally, the crops are not able to withstand high salinity, but these are varieties which are adapted to such conditions. Next. So there are so many types of these are the rice varieties which are very high in iron content. So instead of putting some artificial chemical iron into rice, or taking some tablets, we can consume this type of rice which is naturally rich in iron. But these rices are not available. They are deliberately sidelined. Next. And their genes and other things are being used for research. Now in India, in the National Gene Bank, there are 4.69 lakh accessions, and out of that, across so many crops, and most of them are basically the farmers varieties. Out of that, 26,363 accessions are under the multilateral system, which was just being presented by Karina. That means they are accessible globally to anyone who wants to access them. And there are this is for 9 crops, as is mentioned in the table. So anybody can take them by a simple next slide, by a simple material transfer agreement. And many of these seeds, as I said, are the farmer's seed, but the farmers don't know. The no consultation with the farmers is going on. No farmer knows that their varieties are listed there and it is accessible globally, and neither they know, nor any consent is taken, nor any benefit is shared. And even the way they have documented or they have maintained the files, it is very confusing, because several of the varieties we don't, and we cannot say whether there are farmers varieties or what kind of varieties, because they don't classify, they don't give names. Whatever names are given, there are several spelling mistakes and several errors which may confuse the thing further. So this is the way they have documented the wealth of farmer seed, and there is no way to know what is going on unless somebody follows it up, and because people are unaware, they don't follow it up also. Next. So this was what was being told about the CGIAR institutions. So there are several CGIAR institutions, and they have a huge collection of seeds. And so the different governments and different institutions gave them seeds for a very long period of time. So one of them is this ICRISAT, which has a very good collection of millets and pulses. It is located in this one in Hyderabad in India, and it has a collection of 35% of the collection is from India, and the 17% of the collection of International Rice Research Institute, which is in Philippines, is from India. So they have these huge collections, and we don't know what they have, and they are sharing to anyone. That also we don't know. What kind of agreements they are doing, to whom they are sharing. And maximum, that is 89% of the materials transferred, that is the 7 million seeds that have been transferred, 89% is from these institutions. So there is no tracking, and they are not answerable to many organizations, or farmers cannot just go and ask them. And they are using their databases and all this seed wealth, they are sharing everywhere. Next. These are some of the variety, I mean, crop wise details. Like if you see 67% of pigeon pea, 58% of foxtail millet, 23% of finger millet, 23% of chickpea, groundnut, all of Indian origin, and they are being shared globally to anyone who wants it. And nobody, and the farmers who had grown them, they don't know. And if you see here, that's what Nitin was talking about, that these are Article 15 means the CGIAR institutions, and you see the number of SMTAs that they have got into 15,000, 16,000 in Africa and Asia. And the national governments, that is the CP is the contracting parties, which is the national government, their numbers are much less. So the major sharing is being done by the CGIAR institutions, and there is no track, there is no transparency of what is going on. Even from Europe, if you see, the CGIAR institutions are less, the national governments are more. It is the opposite of Asia and Africa. Next. So these are some unique cultivars which saw in their databases. This is one variety. In the left is Sati, which is a kind of a clistogamous paddy, and it is drought tolerant and has a lot of medicinal properties, and it is already registered in the name of a farmer in India. Yet this variety is available under multilateral system, and it is also available in digital sequences, so you can download it. But the farmer in whose name it is registered has no information, no consent, nothing was taken from him. Similarly, for those other two varieties which are having the saline tolerant properties, drought tolerant properties, this is some of the seeds taken from Assam, that is the northeastern part of India, and they took 6,630 seeds in 1960s and 70s, and they don't write the names of the varieties, they just write ARC, which means Assam rice collection. Then you have to know which variety, and you have to do a lot of studies to understand which variety are they talking of. And 40% of the rice genome sequences which can be downloadable are in this format. So somebody has to really do a lot of good research to understand which is the variety. Some of these varieties in the pictures, their sequences can be downloaded, and something can be patented from those. Next. And already patenting is going on. If you see the International Rice Research Institute, they have already patented this Kodian variety of rice, which is from Kerala in South India. This is having a special property of anaerobic germination. That is, when the water stagnation happens, the oxygen is not available in the soil. Under that circumstances, this rice can germinate, the seeds can germinate. So they have patented that particular gene, but for some reason they didn't commercialize it. Then another, there is a Indonesian rice, which daringan, whose spike gene has been patented. So this patenting of genes are also going on, and no consent or no benefit sharing is being done. Next. Then there is a very important case of a wild rice, which is Oryza longistaminata from Mali in Africa. And this is a wild rice which is used by the Bela community there. It is part of their diet and a lot of cultural practices. And what happened, that the seeds from Mali came to India, where a research institute found that this rice is resistant to a particular disease called bacterial blight. And then This rice variety was transferred to International Rice Research Institute in Philippines, where they identified the genetic locus, which was called XA21. And then in Philippines, the scientists in Philippines, they developed rice variety. They through breeding with that wild rice, they developed a rice variety in Philippines. And then this XA21 gene, which is causing this resistance to that bacterial blight, it was sequenced and cloned at the University of California in United States and patented there. And in terms of benefit sharing, when people ask that what is the benefit for the African community, for Mali, then they offered some PhD fellowships, and which nobody was interested, and neither it was useful for the Bela community. So this is the way they are patenting traditional seeds and knowledge, and then they are offering PhDs which is not applicable, or which is of not of any use to those people. uh, Next one. There's another case of Rwanda. Here it is a potato variety which they have developed, and they have developed it through gene editing. So in gene editing, they have inserted they have taken three genes, out of which two genes have been taken from two potato varieties from Mexico, one from Mexico, one from Argentina, and they have put it in a potato variety which was from East Africa. And now they have created a gene edited potato which they sent to Rwanda and Uganda for commercialization. And so neither the Mexican farmers, nor the Argentinian farmers, nor the East African farmers got any benefits or any recognition for all this that they provided. And the second thing is that these genes were sequenced artificially using gene synthesizers, and that was done in UK and Netherlands, and the institutions there patented it. They got commercial rights on it. And then it was that particular gene was actually produced in a machine which was done in United States and Germany. And then the International Research Institute put it in that East African potato and brought this cisgenic gene edited potato for commercialization in Rwanda and Uganda. And what did it result in? It resulted in the destabilization of the small farmer market, and no benefits or no recognitions for the farmers of the original countries was done. So this is how the system is operating. And you can download any sequence. There are, I mean, 6 million individual sequences in number of databases across the world. And you can go to the internet, you can go to these sites, and you can download those sequences. And if you your sequence of interest, and you can maybe patent it, or you can do gene editing, you can bring out different products, and without any transparency or any benefit sharing, or anybody may not be knowing also. We don't know. People are maybe already doing things like that. And for example, this Rwanda case, also there was such a case for potato, where PepsiCo sued farmers in India for using a particular potato seed which PepsiCo claimed to have developed, even though the court overturned it. But these type of cases can happen more because we are not having any information on what's going on. Yeah, I think I will invite Nitin now for part 3 presentation. Thank you.
Before Nithin comes on, there is a question to Saumik, clarification question. So did these transfers happen through the MLS?
Yeah, actually, we are not sure whether they happened through MLS, but that is what is our understanding, that it must be through MLS, because these are not very old, developments. It was after the seed treaty was formed. So we feel that these are under MLS, but we are yet to get the full details.
Okay, thank you, Samik. There are a couple of other questions from Dr. Annie as well, but perhaps Nitin, you can also take it in your presentation.
I think we will take it in the discussion time. These are, mm, is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Go ahead.
So I just want to, firstly, before moving to the third part, which is about the new proposals, I just wanted to reassert a couple of things which Saumik was telling, essentially regarding the SMTA and these cases. We have no ability to know. That is the, I mean, perhaps this might have happened outside of, MLS, but it is through an international gene bank. Now, the entire legal framework of the treaty is would actually basically legitimizes these kind of transactions, even without letting us know what is happening with our seats. That's one thing which I want to reassert. Second thing I want to reassert was basically regarding the sequence information. So the science have moved. Of course, seed breeding, etc., requires access to physical materials. But at least for the research and identifying traits, etc., a lot of things can be done at the bioinformatics level. Do in the computer in a digitized format, and only towards the end you come and do translate those genes into synthetic sequences, and then insert that synthetic sequences into the traditional seeds or natural seeds, etc. But a lot of research happens at the bioinformatics level, at the digital world itself, and then there are a lot of businesses happening in those sectors as well. And there is also IPRs taken on these kind of digital information or digital traits. For example, a trait could be patented, a trait could be patented, and just an industry can just keep licensing traits to different breeders, right, and keep money getting money from there. There are several bioinformatic research organizations who just provide research services, who do not enter into breeding but still do research services for and making a lot of money. But none of these things are covered under treaty. Keep it in mind. That's one thing. Second thing, these sequences, like just previously, uh, Saumik was showing, these are websites directly from international gene banks. IRIS gene banks, and this one I think is ICRISAT or CIMIT. I think it's not CIMIT, it's ICRISAT. These, you can just go there and download. You don't have to give your user registration. You don't have to give your email ID. You don't have to tell which university you're working for or which company you're working for. Completely anonymously shared, right? And this is a big challenge also happening in this sector. So I give seed to someone like Saumek, or I mean, not taking names, sorry, to give somebody else, and he might sequence it, and he can put it up on the world, I mean, on the database which shares things anonymously. And even though the treaty is only for breeding purposes, people from food flavor industries, food ingredients industries, processed food industries, all of these people come and take these sequences and do work, right? Like, for example, you have now heard about, like, plant-based substitutes for meats, right? This is a growing business, and all of them uses sequences, and most of them get it anonymously from these databases, so they don't have to share benefits, or they don't have to actually inform the farmers who've been developing all these things. So that's a big challenge. Now let's go. What is it, the current enhancement proposals for this system? Okay, so let me explain a small process. That was there was a open-ended working group established, like constituting around 25 to 27 member states or parties, countries, representatives, mostly technical people coming from gene banks or Ministry of Agriculture, to develop certain mechanisms or measures by which the process of ABS, or the multilateral system under the treaty, will be enhanced. And actually, they started working in 2013. They were suspended indefinitely in 2019, especially because of the issues relating to digital sequence information and other aspects. Okay. And this was resumed in 2020. This working group resumed its work in 2022 and passed through a checkpoint in 2023. GB9 and GB10, they came together and explained a lot of things and said that they will be able to finish the work and propose something new to enhance the multilateral system. But the sad point of this working group process was there are 5 meetings since 2022, and all the 5 meetings worked on a single point agenda: how to make multilateral system attractive to commercial seed sector. How can we invite more and more seed companies to use MLS? This was the question. And the rationale given was only 13% of the users are from seed sector, right? Like if 28,000 users are there, only 13% are from seed sector, which means around 3,000 or something, right? And we don't know why out of these 3,000, only 6 paid benefit sharing. And we kept assuming in the working group process, I was also observer member of this working group, we kept assuming, seed users or breeders or seed companies don't come to multilateral system. They don't come to international gene banks. They keep developing by themselves, all these things, without taking into consideration that out of these so many SMTAs or so many users, only 6 have paid benefits. And there was actually a mandate in 2023 governing body to the working group that they should take into account implications on farmers' rights in developing these measures. So if you're proposing a measure, you should actually think about, or you should do a study about the implications on how this measure will affect farmers' rights, and then develop measures based on that, or establish safeguards so that if there is something negative happening to farmers' rights, it has to be stopped. Okay, this was a requirement. But this mandate was completely neglected. There was no discussion, no study, no document on farmers' right, implication of farmers' rights in implementing these measures. What have they done is in the report of the working group, they have mentioned that co-chairs of the working group were invited to consider implications of farmers' rights. They have considered it, and they decide and they have understood that these proposed measures should not be used to limit farmers' rights, right? This is just in the working group report. How does it help farmers' rights, safeguarding farmers' rights? Nobody understands. And this working group, after these 5 meetings, has now proposed a draft package of measures, which is really, really biased. I'll show you in next slides how it is biased. Of course, there is no consensus in the working group because a lot of developing countries, especially from Asia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Nepal, has been critically resisting these proposals, saying that there needs to be some form of fairness and equity in it. They have alternative proposals. Unfortunately, many of them are not reflecting in the draft package of measures or in the working report in the correct manner. Many of these people have proposed, right? So this is where it is we are now. And let's see what is the basic and the most important proposal coming from the working group. Okay, there is this proposal, which is the most important proposal, is to amend the treaty in itself. Okay, this is the only proposal to amend treaty, and this proposal is talking about nothing but expanding that Annex 1 which we have, which is basically we are saying 64 crops is the one currently treaty is dealing with. Let us expand it. Let us include all other plant genetic resources for food and agriculture. This is the critical proposal coming from the working group, even though bracketed, right? This is the only proposal to amend treaty. There is no proposal to amend treaty for improving benefit sharing, for improving governance, for improving transparency or accountability. Okay, and they have given a negative list approach. Like your country has to say at the time of accepting this amendment that if they want to limit any limited number of species or exempt any limited number of species from the multilateral system. So if you don't notify this limited number of species, then all of your national collections is actually back in the multilateral system. So if you go back and see the slide from um, uh, Soumik, actually India has 4,69,000 accessions of seeds from several crops, right? But India so far has notified only 9 crops, and out of these 9 crops, 26,363 accessions are part of the MLS. But now, at the time of adopting this particular amendment, if India does not notify anything, or India does not say, okay, I limit access to, let's say, access to potato, okay, from India. If they don't do it, the entire 4,69,000 accessions is automatically part of what we call as multilateral system. The scope is covering these lakhs. So not only these collections, it has to be understood that in the proposal, there is a lot of other technicalities and nuances, whereby even to an extent, seeds in wild, seeds in farmers' field can all get, become part of multilateral system. I'm not going into details of how it can happen, but I'm just letting you know that these things can happen. Okay, and there is a lot of proposal on pressure on countries. If at all they adopt this negative list, certain measures are proposed so that they will keep eliminating species from this negative list. So if India at the time of accepting this amendment says, okay, we are exempting 5 crops, then India is under constant pressure to make that 5 into 4 and 4 into 3 and then eliminate the list as such. Okay, this is what it is. And developing countries like especially Malaysia has proposed an alternative to actually say that we cannot open up the entire annex right away, but what we can do over a period of time, we can expand the annex with more and more crops. Okay, we can have such a dynamic system, provided every time we expand, we also ensure that there is proper governance, there is better traceability, better transparency, better accountability, okay, better benefit sharing. If we see that mutually reinforcing, we can keep amending, keep expanding the annex 1. But sadly, this proposal is not is explicitly written in the package which is submitted to the governing body. So the working group has submitted this package to the governing body, and the governing body meeting in November will consider whether to adopt these measures or not. That's the context in which we are talking. Okay, this is the most important proposal of the expansion of enhancement of MLS. It is not to improve benefit sharing or governance, but to expand the seats covered under the MLS. Okay. Now comes the actual thing which was which was not functioning, which was the benefit sharing. What is the proposal to improve benefit sharing? Okay. The proposal says 2 options. They say there is a subscription option and a single access option. Okay. Now, the single access option means they will pay, like if I am taking the seed from the multilateral system, I took a seed, I developed that seed, and I commercialized the developed variety, right? And I make benefits out of it. So when money comes into that, from that seed, I go back and give a percentage of my profits or my revenue to the benefit sharing fund. This is single access payment, okay? Now, what the subscribers would do, and this is optional, it is not necessary that anybody should go and take subscription system. It's an optional system whereby instead of taking this and submitting clear financial statements on the seeds which I developed and commercialized, etc., I take up an option which says I am subscribing to the entire multilateral system, and from my entire profit of seed sales, I take a certain percentage to the benefit sharing fund. Okay, this is the subscriber system. Now, do not get confused or misled by the word single access system, that the single access means, okay, you get only access to one seed. There is no limit on you on accessing n number of seeds what you want. How many seeds you want, you can access. But it's called as single access. We don't know why it is called as single access. Okay. And subscribers also has a very interesting option. For example, if I'm a big seed company and let us say my basic seed sales, my 80% of my seed sale is coming from maize and sorghum. Okay. While becoming subscriber, I say, I do not want maize and sorghum from the multilateral system, and I will not be paying benefits from the profits I get for these 2 seed sales. So up to 2 seeds I can exempt when I become subscriber, and I will work on the rest of the seeds. So this is one of the way subscribers are also kind of made appeasing. Okay, you have already a good business in maize, so you don't have to rely on multilateral system on maize, so you don't have to pay from multilateral system, right? But you get access to all other seeds. Now the problem with that is, I might be a company who's very well doing business in maize and sorghum, and I wanted to expand in tomato. But for me to do a decent business on tomato, I might take 5 to 6 years of breeding cycle or research and development process. Until that 5 to 6, 7 years, I don't have to pay anything, right? Because my seeds and sales are basically from maize and sorghum, right? So this becomes a challenge. These are the proposals to improve benefit sharing. And there is also something slightly different from what is existing, is that proposal to make a compulsory payment, even if I am actually allowing my developed seeds for further research and breeding, right, without restriction. So in the existing system, as a breeder has to only make payments if they prohibit further research from their new variety. Like if I am selling a new variety developed using multilateral system, and I prohibit all of others to do or restrain others from doing research on my variety, only at that time I have to share benefits. Okay. In this case, they have made that change that even if you allow them to freely do research, you have to make a payment. Okay. So this is the status. And there was actually no other proposals to improve benefit sharing, which sound very uh, uh, important and very developed. Okay. There was a call from Malaysia, Philippines, and Nepal to expand the scope of commercialization, like not only seed sales, but also somebody who makes beer, or somebody makes processed food, somebody who makes trait licensing, all these kind of different businesses. They all have to make compensation or pay money to the benefit sharing fund, but it is also not reflected neither in the report nor in the draft package. I can give a simple example. There was this example of barley seeds taken by Heineken beer, right? And they never sold uh, barley seeds. Instead, they converted barley into beer and kept selling beer. So they don't fall under the requirement of benefit sharing as per the treaty's standard material transfer agreement. So as civil societies, we tried to expose this, and we actually demanded to improve the scope of benefit sharing on this. And based on this, we understand, or at least we think this is the reason why which Asia also tried to push for expanding scope of commercialization. But again, it is not reflected in the proposal submitted to the governing body. So you can see what is the proposals on benefit sharing. Now, there was another important aspect, which is the digital sequence information, which we were talking about. Sequence can be downloaded anonymously, etc., etc. This particular word, digital sequence information, does not appear in treaty. Okay. So it is a critical place where you should actually amend the treaty and talk about digital sequence information. But unfortunately, there is no amendment proposal to the treaty or to the SMTA to include these words. There are, the proposals from the working group co-chairs, which was debated or negotiated, does not have this proposal at all to amend SMTA or to amend the treaty. They are talking, okay, we will talk about this as DSI in a draft resolution, which is not even binding, which is not a legally binding instrument, right? It cannot bind users, it cannot bind recipients, right? It cannot, for example, I take seeds from you and do work on DSI and upload DSI anywhere what I want. I'm not bound because this whatever is being talked is in draft resolution. I have only signed to SMTA, right? So it does not help me, right? So this is the situation in which sequence information has been approached. Of course, luckily, Africa, Asia, and Latin America, etc., came together and put one or two proposals in the SMTA, so that at least it will look like when I take seats, I have certain obligations what I need to do with DSI. But this is vehemently opposed, strongly opposed by a developed country. So very, very limited chance that this will get accepted. And there is literally no specific measure, even in the draft resolution, to stop digital biopiracy. When I say digital biopiracy, anonymously using DSI from the internet, right? There is nothing, not even a recommendation to stop that appearing in the draft resolution. So not even binding or non-binding measure is proposed to reduce digital biopiracy. So you can see what is the kind of proposals which has gone to the governing body, right? And finally, the draft package nowhere has any specific measures to protect farmers' rights, safeguards against their infringement in the operations of multilateral system. There is no proposal to improve governance, accountability, transparency. Instead, they have introduced 3 new confidentiality clauses into the agreement, which means further the information will be suppressed. Whatever treaty secretariat is doing now in violation of the SMTA, like there is a current obligation to report to governing body, but they don't do it. They give only aggregate numbers. That will be legitimized using these 3 confidentiality clauses. So this is where another thing. And there is no strengthening. So there is a provision in the treaty which says when you take IPRs or plant variety protection on your developed varieties, you should not limit the functioning of multilateral system. You should not do it in a way access to seeds in the multilateral system will be reduced. Okay. But this is not at all effective because a lot of trades have been taken into, patents, etc., and create problems. And it is not connected to farmers' rights, right? Because IPRs are used to harass farmers. harass traditional seed systems, close down traditional seed systems, right? So we should have something connecting this IPR law to traditional seed systems. That is also not available, right? And there is no proposals to regulate environmentally unsound use of seeds or into research, etc. This is the status. So how is this biased draft package measures? Somebody asked me, I had a plain table showing about these proposals, weak proposal, strong proposal, etc. And someone told, hey, you should put colors, green, yellow, red, etc., so that people understand what is problematic. And when I started trying to put colors, I really understand there was nothing to show in green. Everything has to be in red, right? So I just put some variations of red in these proposals to expanding an X or tracking payments or benefits or protecting on farmers' rights, involvement of their involvement in seed research and breeding, vigilance against fraudulent IPRs, biopiracy, expanding scope of benefit. I put all these things. Everything is bad, right? Because it's not supporting any of our rights, neither farmers' rights nor national seed sovereignty, right? So it's really, really weak. When it comes to expanding Annex 1, it's a binding measure on countries. When it comes to expand or doing some improvement on benefit sharing, it is only in the SMTA. Even there, it is optional systems. You have no guarantee that these benefits will be paid. Without tracking, without accountability, without public scrutiny, why should a company make a payment, right? It's a big question. It's a simple question, right? And then there is no proposals like protecting farmers' rights or promoting farmers' involvement in seed breeding research, or even risk assessment evaluation of new varieties when they are put back into seed systems or released into farmers' fields. Nothing is there, right? Expanding scope of benefit share, nothing is there. And bad proposals, as I said, you're making confidentiality rules, and you're asking, you're legitimizing sharing of DSI anonymously in the world. So this is the status. And with this last slide, I'll stop. So what we are proposing is that we have to demand a clear change in the practice of treaty secretariat, withholding information regarding the recipients of seeds, right? This has to be reported to the governing body according to the present SMTA. So until now, whatever has been shared, like there have been so many SMTAs, and we need to know who all the users, who all researchers have accessed our seeds. That has to be published. We need a platform which is accessible to farmers, and where all contributing farmers should have ease of information of understanding who has taken their seeds, right? This is the most important demand which we should make. And then the second one we are going to make is to demand the complete rejection of this biased draft package of measures and ask for an initiation of a new process which will prioritize farmers' rights, national sovereignty, and governance reforms, right? This is very, very important. Otherwise, we will not be able to have a better system, have a better seed treaty, which is all, very important for us to have some form of international agreement, which would enable good research, which will enable good benefits. But that has to happen with good governance. Otherwise, it will not come into play. So these demands we should be raising in the two upcoming meetings, one in September, which happens in Philippines. It's a global symposium on farmers' rights organized by the treaty, and then the governing body in Peru, where this package of measures will be considered for adoption. So I stop here. I give back to Teva, and let's have a discussion on questions and action forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nitin. Thank you, Karina and Samik as well. And welcome back to the discussion. So I'm going to open the floor to discussion right now and bring our speakers in. And to also have an active discussion on the next steps on what we can do between now and us moving to Philippines and to Peru. So first off, I'm going to pick up a question from the chat group from Dr. Annie. The first question is there something like a rapid alert or a notification system at the International Gene Bank level before the GIS to notify national agencies when application to access happens? That's the first question. And the second question is, how effective or farmer-friendly is the redress and compensation mechanism under the MLS? And are there any cases where farmers or communities filed claims that their seeds have been misappropriated? I know whether you or Nitin or, Nitin, you or Saumik or even Karina would like to take this on.
So as far as I understand, because we were the ones who were asking these questions to the Secretariat, as well as in the working group, like how do we know where are our seats, right? How do national authorities know? So, for example, a lot of national authorities were saying, we believe that the system is to build research partnerships and collaborations, and they want to work with universities across the world to promote their agriculture systems. And then we asked the question, okay, how many of these agricultures have come, universities have come to you? If they're all going to international gene banks, do you have even a connection with them? Right? So as far as we understand, there is no information system alerting national authorities or contributors farmers regarding who is taking seeds once it leaves the country border. So if as an agriculture university, let's say Malaysian university comes to India, take it from India's national gene bank, India's national authorities know. Still Indian farmers will not know, right? Indian national authority will know. But if Malaysian researcher or European researcher goes to international gene bank and take it, there is no obligation on the gene bank to let India know or Malaysia know or any other country know.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nitin. I'm going to open the floor, and
One
if you would,
second, on the question as to whether farmers and indigenous communities can take action when there's misappropriation, I don't think there's anything under the MLS framework that provides for it. So if there is a situation of seed misappropriation, then we proceed under national intellectual property regimes, and that's why to have a progressive intellectual property law is so important.
I'm sorry, I would make slight
That's right.
deviation from Karina's view.
Okay.
I understand that there is no effective system, because, for example, as a farmer, you don't even get to know, right, who is accessing your seeds and who is making seed, unless you do a DNA analysis of the seed which is patented or PVP guaranteed, and finally find out, okay, your seed has been misappropriated. Then only you try to go file a case, and most of the times you go and file it at the level of patenting, right? Not to the MLS who has actually provided these access to the seats. But there is a proposal in the SMTA as well as in the treaty that you can always make a complaint to FAO to consider violations of SMTA. So if for example, under the treaty, SMTA says that you should only use it for training, breeding, and some research purposes for food and agriculture. So let us assume that I shared the seed, or India's gene bank shared seed to International Gene Bank, and then somebody came, took that seed under the same agreement, saying that it is for food and agriculture purposes, and then he develops something like a chemical fertilizer, or use it for developing something like a medicinal purpose. You develop a natural medicine, and then you sell that medical product. It's actually exceeding the act of the purpose which is mentioned under the contract, and you are actually misappropriating seed for another purpose, because in this case, as you're using it for medicinal use, you should have actually come to India, taken it from India's biodiversity authority, and provided directly benefits to India, right? So only for food breeding or seed breeding, you are taking it through the MLS, and you're paying benefits to the FAO fund, right? So you are actually acting in violation of SMTA, and you have, as a provider or even as a independent observer, you can actually make a complaint. I think ETC group has made once a complaint to FAO as on this regard of misusing MLS. But I was recently asking ETC and few others who are working in this area, how do we sustain, how do we have a proper vigilance system to talk to track these kind of misappropriations? Everybody was like, it's a very tedious task to find out misappropriation of the treaty. Actually, the CGIR centers came out with a study. They said even the use of multilateral system cannot be detected. So if use cannot be detected, how are you going to detect what you call as misuse? That's also a big question, right?
okay. Thanks a lot, Nitin. Are there any other questions coming from the floor? You can raise your hands or unmute yourself. I see a question from Hanim. What is the position of several developing countries regarding the seed treaty negotiations, for example, Indonesia?
So, as far as we observed, the working group, Indonesia is not a member. So Indonesia has not appeared. We believe Indonesia has a significant concern regarding the operations of multilateral system. And one of the reasons by which Indonesia is not very active in terms of notifying seats and sharing seats through the system. But as far as I understand, most likely they're just informed about the expansion of annex. Maybe in the May, Sam actually wrote a letter during an Asia regional meeting during May 2025. I assume that's the time when the Ministry of Indonesia actually got aware of this issue. Like there is going to be a big expansion of multilateral system, and we are yet to see their response. We have really good hopes that Indonesia will push back.
Okay, that's hopefully we can get some better response between now and the meeting in Peru. That's what we are aiming for, right? Any other questions from the floor?
Just wanted to highlight that Nitin has shared the letter in the chat,
So
the sign on.
India Seed Sovereignty Alliance is, I mean, after we working TWN and Lavia Campesina, etc., working through the working group, we tried to push back and a lot, and we found good supporters like Sam as well as India Seed Sovereignty Alliance, who had kindly taken initiatives to take it to masses, take it to further farmers groups and civil society organizations. So in May, Sam organized similar meeting, and we sent out a letter to Asia's governing negotiators, which was effective because we saw very strong positions from Malaysia, Philippines, Nepal during last meeting. And this is a proposal now coming from India Seed Sovereignty Alliance. They also took a very good stance in July, writing several letters to Indian government, even influencing some of the state ministers to write to central ministers. They were very active in those proposals. Like there was also other farmers groups like RMK, RSK kind of thing. People were involved in these processes, inviting scientists and ministers and academics to write to India government. And they also wrote a big letter, which was around signed by 236 people just for India, right? So now India Seed Sovereignty Alliance have decided to write to FAO Director General and Treaty Secretariat to change these practices of, not publishing or not reporting to governing body, the SMTAs, as well as to highlight the way in which working groups proposals and process were biased, because they worked on a single point agenda to appease seed sector and neglected the explicit mandate from the governing body to take into account implications on farmers' right and develop safeguards on that. So I think India Seed Sovereignty Alliance is reaching out globally to sign this letter and reach out to FAO to say that this entire process need to be revamped, prioritizing farmers' rights. And we request everyone to sign the letter. We have shared that letter in the uh, uh, chat, and you can see the links, and we can also share email to you as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Nitin. So I hope everybody signs on to the letter, which is there. And in fact, the seedtreaty.org, if you want to know more about the treaty itself, it's a very good website which gives you a lot of information on what the treaty is about. For me itself, is pretty mind-boggling. And